Hello, Hovians, and welcome back to the third channel. Huzzah! I have reclaimed the adventure of the world's best person and the world's best interviewer. Yes, I know, modest I am. So, before we get on with the glorious interview, the top admin of the day is as of, let's say, as of 8:50, shall we say, on the 23rd of August. Tom Mason's Chijan Productions has expanded his empire to its 19th YouTube channel called Button House Confidential, which is all about the UK version of Ghost. And every so often, we'll talk about the US version of Ghost. Basically, it's terrible, but we have to talk about it, or else you'll get punched in the face by a ghost. You don't want to upset the fiends that they are. And so, we move on. Today we're back doing interviews, and this is a very glorious interview. He's best known for appearing in most British sitcoms, because he is the man that you'll know, because he's in everything, and he's best known for his fantastic podcast you'll get addicted to, My Time Capsule. It's one and only my Fenton Stephen!
Hooray! Tom, how are you?
I'm alright. So,
That was not the response I expected. Oh, yeah, I'm all right. That's it. That's full of enthusiasm. Thanks very much. I mean, I give my best effort there at a hello, a big, loud, singing hello. No, nothing. Yeah, I'm all right. You Northerners, honestly.
We'll start at the point of the very existence of your career. How did you get into acting?
Well, it took me a long time to get into acting. Actually, I got into sketch comedy, really, which, some people say isn't acting. That's sort of jumping at a character, doing a silly voice and trying to be funny, which may well be true. And I probably still do it now. But, I went to Oxford Brookes, it's now called, but I went to what at the time was Oxford Polytechnic with the idea that I would be a lawyer. So I studied law. And while I was there, I got involved in lots and lots of theatre. So I joined nearly every university college drama group, and there were loads of them. And I joined the Polytechnic drama group, and I joined other groups, and I joined the town's theatre group. And I did, while I was a student, 33 plays. I know. You may well ask, how the hell did you get time to study? The answer to that is, I didn't. So I basically I crammed right at the end, as if I were taking on a role at the last minute. Suddenly there was a script, I had to learn it, and I'd learned everything I could, and I just scraped through. Anyway, while I was up there doing that, I went to Edinburgh, to the Edinburgh Festival, and we did 3 plays, very serious, that nobody came to see, and I also agreed to be in the review. In the evening, so I was doing 4 shows a day. First one at 10 o'clock, second one at 1 o'clock, third one at 5 o'clock, and the last one at 11 o'clock at night. So I was quite exhausted, but the review had Angus Deaton and Philip Pope in it, who I've spent much of my career working with in one way or another, and it went a storm. I can only describe it that way. Actually, people really loved it. In it, we had a song which was a parody of the Bee Gees called Meaningless Songs in Very High Voices, in the days when we could all sing really high in falsetto. And it just took off. We got a record deal. We got offered a radio series by a man called Jimmy Mulville, who now owns and runs Hat Trick Productions. But he was a BBC Radio 4 producer at the time. Came up to us, said, "Do you want to do a radio show?" And we went, yeah. And I was still a student, Tom. So everything sort of fell in my lap, really. And as a result of that, when you're on the radio doing silly voices, people start saying, "Do you want to do this voiceover for a commercial?" Yeah. And so, it was lovely. I had a great time. But it was years before I actually thought, I really ought to go and do a proper play or something. So I think I was probably about 26, 27 by the time I actually did do a play. And then I loved it.
Yeah. As a young, wee, small, very tiny child, did your ambitions of going to do stuff on the stage?
My father was very keen on performing. He was a solicitor, which is why I went down that road. But he loved being on stage, and in fact, he was only really alive, I think, when he was in front of people showing off. And he was a big show-off. And he had no shame in that at all. You know, some people are. And he was a very good performer as well. He knew what to do, and he was a great singer and very good at telling jokes. So I sort of followed in his footsteps, really, following my father's footsteps. I used to go and do shows every weekend with him. He had a group of people that he would get together and they would put on shows, either old-time musicals or just entertainment evenings for people. And most weekends he had something booked in some church hall or social club or whatever. And we would go along, and I went along, and I would start, was about 8, started singing, sweet little boy, they loved that. And then I moved on to sort of telling jokes and doing routines with him. So by the time I went off to college, I felt that I knew how to get in front of an audience. I had no fear of being in front of an audience, which, of course, many people, when they first go off to university or college, they may have done a school play, but they won't have had the sense of, on a Saturday night in a men's working club performing comedy, which I'd done.
Yeah. And as a child, was there anything on TV, or any TV shows that were another stepping stone to help you process that you want to be on the stage?
Yeah, well, I think anybody of my age will say that the things that sort of influenced them most were things that actually are rather old-fashioned. So Morecambe and Wise would have been the thing, really. I watched Morecambe and Wise. I loved Eric Morecambe, thought he was a fantastically funny man. No question about that. I'm not the first person to say that. But I didn't really, until I became a student, I didn't really get to understand the other things that could have influenced me. And a lot of people I met, they'd already been influenced by them. So, in fact, a lot of stuff that was happening on the radio, particularly just before I went, so post the Pythons, really. So Monty Python created this thing where you could do slightly zany, weird, strange sort of comedy. And I'd not really come across it in my world. My world was full of Eric Morecambe. So and it really end of the pier stuff. That's what I grew up on. I grew up on, in a way, the tradition of the war, and before that. That's so because I was watching my father, which is where he came from. So actually, it's only when I went to university I suddenly discovered this other way of doing things. But it was, to me, it was just another form of comedy, and so it was fine. Yeah.
Throughout your career, you've done so much. Do you prefer doing radio stuff, or do you prefer being on the shiny TV screens?
It's a difficult thing to answer, really. They're all very different. Each discipline that you do, theatre, radio, television, even, the sort of things that people would dismiss, like doing commercials, doing television adverts, which are fascinating because, in fact, more money and more time is spent on those than even a film. The detail in which it's done is amazing. So that's quite a discipline and quite a skill to learn. And I think I did learn it. I did a lot of commercials, Tom, when I was a young man. And hence my house and everything else, it's all paid for. Lovely. So I'm very lucky. But I between radio and television, I like the combination of using your voice, but at the same time being able to demonstrate something visually. So if I would say television wins out, although radio is I think the easier form, because I like the instant nature of it. I like the fact that basically you meet at midday or something, you read through the script, you then rehearse it in front of a microphone, and then you perform it. And what you do in those moments is the decision you've made, and that's it.
Yeah, and radio's also cheaper in the sense of it doesn't require sets. So you could go to wherever you want and say
or costumes, or in fact as many actors, because you can have about 2 actors play most parts if you get the right actors. I used to play. I played I think hundreds of parts in a series called Old Harry's Game, written by Andy Hamilton, who did Outnumbered, and he wrote this fantastic radio series. And if you've never heard it, then look it up, because there are loads of them. I think we did 15 series of it, but it's a brilliant comedy. And Andy is one of the great comedy writers of our generation, or my generation, Tom. Sorry to include you in my generation. That's ridiculous. Anyway, he's fantastic. And I had enormous fun doing it. But he would say, these are the parts you're playing this week, Mike. And it would be from playing a demon to play Shakespeare, because the fundamental idea of hell was that virtually everybody goes there.
Yeah. And if you want to listen to Old Harry's Game, I think most series are available on Audible, because you just buy. I don't know if they're all in one or they might be releasing another, but I think most of them are in it. You can definitely You can definitely watch. You can definitely listen to series 1, and then you can listen to the 2012 election special. So
Yeah.
there's I think it must all be there. But what was it like once it had gone out, Old Harry's Game, and your episodes that you've appeared in have gone out? Did you get like people coming up to you, recognizing you, like by every time you were in a cafe?
You never really get recognised from radio. No. I mean, people might know that you've done it. People who follow those things will get excited. There was a period where I was in the Archers. I was in the Archers for about 2 years, and I played a character called Paul, who was the brother of Matt, who at the time was Lillian's husband, but also not a trustworthy man, and everybody hated him. So he was a baddie in the Archers, and I played his brother, who then has an affair with Lillian. And the character I played, when I first got it, it described him as being, he was a builder. Although he was quite a well-qualified builder, he did sort of renovations of old buildings, so he was very skilled. But even still, he was from London, he was a builder, so I decided that I would go, London more. I visualised this rather hefty, strong hand, slightly with scars on it, one of those people, like a proper builder. And actually, I just went much deeper. I did the whole thing like down there, And actually, when you get very close and you talk very quietly and you just say, "You're the most beautiful woman I've ever met," it does something. It really does do something. It's very weird.
Playing a builder on the radio, did you have to like talk to a lot of builders to try and get the sense of what a builder actually does and how they react to each other?
Yeah, you seem to be completely misinterpreting my way of acting, Tom. I think almost deliberately, in as much as I've already told you I come from a review tradition, which means that basically somebody puts a script in front of you and you say it. You get on with it. I'm really not the Daniel Day-Lewis school of acting. I'm much more I think I know what a builder sounds like. And off I go.
And not only have you appeared on the radio, I say appeared, you've delved into someone's ears. You're like a worm. You've sucked into the radio. What was it like appearing in the underrated classic Hat Plus?
Was I in that?
Yeah.
Oh, Lord. Do you know, the problem with any career like this, Tom, is that I've done so many different things that many of them I can't even remember having done. I remember the people who were in them.
Yeah.
I remember the fun we had. And quite often I remember where we went when we were filming things. But recently I filmed an episode of Death in Paradise. And the director of it said, "I'm really looking forward to working with you again, Mike." And so I had to look up my own career to find out what it was we'd done together. Isn't that terrible? So really asking me details of what it was like to be in things. If you ask me what so-and-so's like, I'll tell you, because generally I remember the people and things more than I remember doing the work. There are lots of things I've done recently that I haven't even seen, Tom. But because the problem is that television now is much more disparate. You can't really, unless I don't sign up for all of them. I can't have Apple TV, Disney Plus, Netflix, Prime. What else are there? There's loads. There's just endless numbers of things. And so I did a series with a television comedy with Hugh Laurie, and it was very good fun. I've never seen it. Wow. I did Slow Horses, which is on Apple TV. My son-in-law tells me it's very good, and I was good in it, which I'm pleased to know. I would hope I would be, because I sort of learned my lines and said them right, so generally that's okay, but I've not seen it. I haven't seen any of these things, Tom. I don't look back. I very rarely look back, actually. People say they will quote things at me. The only things I do recognize are lines from Only Fools and Horses, because people will quote them at me so often. In the street or in shops, people will suddenly say phrases from the television show, and you go, when it first happens, you think, what the hell are they talking about? And I just smile and go, hey, yeah, that's right. But I haven't the faintest idea what most people are talking about.
Well, Only Fools and Horses. It's literally on repeat 24/7. The air it every weekend, and sometimes on one occasion it's the same episode every all day. You watch it, and then you watch it, and then you watch a separate version when they've split it into two parts, and then they can put another episode of Only Fools and Horses in between the episode you're in the middle of watching.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I'm amazed that there isn't an Only Fools and Horses channel.
Well, technically gold, technically then it's the
Is that what it is?
They do Only Fools and Horses and The Last of Summer Wine all day, every day, and nothing else.
Yeah.
And occasionally, when it's a special event, they show Only Fools and Horses in the evening as well.
Wow.
Yeah, when they want
Wow.
to they show it in the evening.
Well, I do, because you've got to make a living. I go to Only Fools and Horses conventions and things like that, and I really enjoy them. I think people are delightful. But I'm always amazed at how concentrated people are on one television program, and from so long ago. And they always say it's the best thing ever been made, isn't it? It's the only, you don't get programs like it nowadays. And I think, well, I don't think you watch television anymore. I think you watch Only Fools and Horses. I did meet one fellow, but this is when you suddenly think, well, should I be doing this? Because he said to me, could you sign this, please? And I said, yeah. I said, do you like my episode? He said, I've never seen it. I said, oh, right. It's in series 6, I think, 6 or 7. He said, no, I only watched the first 3. I said, why do you only watch it? He said, I've got a DVD. It's got the first 3 on it. I said, you can get the rest, In fact, they're available here. In fact, I'll buy you one. If you really like it, I'll buy you one. You can watch the rest, and you can watch my episode. He said, no. I'm happy with that, thank you. I thought, okay. That was it. He didn't know who I was. No idea.
Good.
Yeah.
That's happened a lot with TV. A lot of people, when the cast sort of change ever so slightly, and they just ignore the new iteration with the slight gashes and as it with the original.
Yes.
Yes.
That thing of I'm not watching it now. I'm not watching it anymore. That's it.
And one of the things that you've been in as you were in a episode, and it's hard to track down the rest of the cast because either they've stopped acting or there's Hugh Dennis and he's a very busy man digging in gardens. But appearing in an episode of the most fascinating made program, Outnumbered.
It was a brilliant program. Well, I've worked with Andy, as you will have guessed. He's one of those people that once he decides you can do his material, because it's very specific what he does. And I did years ago say to him, it's really nice of you to keep casting me, Andy. And he said, no, it's all right. You understand the beats. Now, anybody in comedy will sort of get that. Will say, oh, right. Oh, thanks. And what he meant was I had his timing.
Yeah.
I knew how to time his lines. So, of course, he'd use me again, because actually he would have spent a lot of time hiring probably much better actors than me, and they just didn't get it. They didn't say it in the timing that he wanted. So he would then say to him, can you just take a little bit longer over that, or can you emphasize that word? Whereas he never had to say that to me. So clearly I understood his comedy, I think. So I've done loads of things, going right back to really, really the early 80s. We first worked together. And I'm delighted that I have his beats, because he's just one of the great writers. Him and Guy Jenkin, they're both such delightful men. Outnumbered. It's one of those things that happens to me every now and again, is that Andy will ring me up and go, hello, Mike, Andy here. And I go, hello, Andy, right? And he says, yeah, I've got a part for you. And he would have written it specifically with me in mind. Now, on several occasions, the character I play in Outnumbered, he's written that character for me before. It's sort of a slightly bumptious person who has an inflated opinion of himself, but it's easy to lose his temper. And I said to him, why do you always write that character? He said, well, that's you, Mike. I said, is it? He said, well, it used to be. You're not like that anymore. And he's right. When I was in my 20s, that was me, I think. So he's seen me do it. We've played football together quite a lot. And I think that when I get into a competitive situation, I'm likely to end up doing exactly what I did in Outnumbered. Find things outrageous. So it was brilliant doing it. And the amazing thing that I didn't even realize when I did it was that because the children in it have to be schooled while they're filming, so they can't just sit there all day waiting to do their scenes like most actors do. They come in for an hour and they do their stuff and then they go away. And then at the end of the day, they can come in for another hour and do their stuff. So while they're there, the camera faces them. It looks at them the whole time and it only concentrates on their lines. So all the lines that you say are off camera. And if they're not given a script, they're told it's like this, say something like that. This is what's happening. So have a conversation along those lines. So although you've learned the script, once you've done the filming with the kids, they then go back and look at things they've said, or they write them down, make notes of them. Andy writes notes and thinks, oh, that was funny. There's a line that Tiger made up, I think, which is about me having piggy eyes. All right, Mr. Piggy Eyes. It's just one of those little lines that he said. And so we had to go back and film me sort of deliberately scrunching my eyes up and all that sort of stuff. But you're not seen while they're there.
Yeah.
So when you do your lines to them, they're not there. Yeah. If you go back and look at it and watch a program, it's so, well, edited, obviously, but you'll have scenes between the children and Claire and Hugh, where they're having arguments with each other. Now, every single shot of Hugh and Claire is done when the children are not there. Every single shot, which is quite extraordinary if you look back at it. It means that actually their ability to imagine those children there, it's just someone with a script saying lines at you and you say them back. I think if you look through that series and once you realise that that's the case, you'll be amazed at the standard of their acting and how brilliant it is.
And Outnumbered's the only program I watch once a year. It's literally I watch from start to finish, and then I wait another year to rewatch it.
And does it take you by surprise every time?
No, because I always try to repeat what they've said because I've seen it so many times. I try and get the very first episode line. I always get it wrong every year. I never get it right. I get the same words but in the wrong order.
Yeah. Well, eventually, you're only young, Tom. You've got years yet to become obsessive.
Well, I think I might have got that a little bit too soon with Doctor Who.
Right, okay. Yes, I noticed. I've never been in Doctor Who. I've never done it. Every time I see Mark Gatiss, he says, have you done Doctor Who? And I say, no. He says, we must get you in. And I go, yeah, please, yeah, I'd love that. But it's not happened yet. I've done Big Finish things a number of times, but I've not done the visual side of it, which would be fun. I'd love to be in Doctor Who, really, because then I could go to a different convention. I wouldn't have to go to only Fools and Horses conventions all the time.
Yeah, because with Doctor Who conventions, there's so many, and even if you're in an episode of Doctor Who for 3 seconds, you could go to every convention and know who you are, and you're just loving life.
Yeah, well, I understand that sort of obsession with a thing where what you want to do is collect everybody. So in fact, being somebody who appeared for 3 seconds in Doctor Who puts you in the category of that sort of rare football card, doesn't it? Yeah.
And one of the things that you're probably most famous for in
I'm not sure I'm famous for anything.
Well, okay. I would say famous for everything, but that's just me. One of the things, and it's like if someone's heard it once, they get obsessed, and then they can't not listen to it. Where did the podcast My Time Capsule come about?
That really came about because my son nagged me for years and years, and if I'd only listened to him, I would now have been doing it for 10 years, and we would be one of the biggest podcasts in the podcast world, because we would have started before everybody else. So the moment the podcasts actually were born, I think, he said, you should do a podcast. And I said, well, what is a podcast? And he said, it's like a radio show or, a chat show, but you can do it for as long as you like, and you can talk about anything. And I went, okay, well, what would I talk about? He said, well, you know loads of people. You've worked with loads of people over your life. I said, but they don't want to talk to me. And he said, well, think of an idea. Think of a format. And I honestly thought for about 5 seconds and said, well, Desert Island Discs is the best format, isn't it, I think? And so it would need to be something like that. So I'm admitting now that I've sort of stolen the idea, but it's a variation on that sort of theme. Basically, you find 5 things from any time in your life that you wish you had in a time capsule. 4 things that you love, and 1 thing that you are happy to bury in the ground and never think of again. And that's it. And I just present people with that idea, and they're allowed to interpret it any way they like, really. They can decide that these things are specific subjects or whatever. I've had all sorts of interpretations of those simple words. People might come back and say, well, so what sort of thing is it? I say anything. Anything you choose, when you think about it, you go, oh, wow, yeah, that was fantastic. So it can be an enormous thing, or it can be really insignificant. So it can be a piece of ribbon which reminds you of whatever. Or it can be, as Craig Ferguson chose, the United States of America, because it reminds him of going to America and having this amazing success as the host of the Late Late Show. It's really good fun. So eventually, after years and years of nagging, my son, who works on it with me, actually, he produces it. So he does the production and I do the chatting. He said to me, come on, for goodness sake, let's do it. So what actually happened was that I got in touch with a couple of people and said, could I come round? What do you think of this idea? Can I come round and chat to you and see how it goes? And so I got in touch with friends, really. But I also thought, well, I'd better go big. If we're going to launch, we should go big. So I contacted Stephen Fry and said, what do you think of this idea, Stephen? Thinking that eventually, after several weeks, he might come back to me and say, it's a very good idea, Mike, but I'm really, really busy. Maybe we can do it in about 3 years' time. Which, is generally the response you get from people like Stephen, because they are very, very busy. And he said, what a brilliant idea. Should we do it tomorrow? And I thought, I might be onto a winner here. And so I said, okay, fine. Got together and we did it. And strangely enough, just the other day, I re-listened to it in its raw form, because we do edit, Tom. We edit slightly. And I think when we first started, we edited more stringently than we do now, because we've realized that actually it's quite nice to have a loose form. And also lots of podcasts, as you'll know, they don't do anything. You just put it out. Whatever you do, that's what you put out. I don't know, you probably don't edit, do you? You just, our conversation will go out.
Well, I edit to make it look fancy, and
right,
and to make it sound like I'm recording in a professional studio rather than recording in a room that's more echoey than a toilet.
Indeed, yes, we're all interested in the sound quality, and sometimes, but I'm amazed actually at how awful the sound can be, and yet people will still listen to it. I've done some recordings. I recorded Rita Rudner, the American comedian, who's an enormous star in America and extremely funny. And I recorded her, and she was in an incredibly echoey, marble-lined room. And I said, you don't have another room that we could record in, do you? And she said, I'm sorry, Mike, that this is the smallest room in my house. It was vast. Absolutely huge room. So there you are. Yeah. But, it was fun. So I did it with Stephen. And just the other day I was going back through it and thinking that we might put it back out again in a much more open form, because, actually just let it run. And so I listened back to see if that was okay. And then I got in touch with Stephen to say, would you mind if we did that? I always check with people to make sure that they're happy with it. And he said, oh, burps and all, yes. So I went, right, okay. And it really is quite interesting.
Now, one of the things that you've done that not many people will have heard of, because it got cancelled after one series, because the main star wasn't actually in it, but what was it like doing the legacy of Reggie Perry?
Well, it was strange, because in a way that was exactly the problem with it. The problem was that it didn't have the main star in it. So it had all the other characters, and I was introduced as a new character. They had the characters just say smashing, lovely, nice, or whatever. And I came in as a sort of a fading yuppie. That's what I was. A fading yuppie who'd been burnt out by the city. And I used to say groovy, which ironically is also the line that I say in Only Fools and Horses as the head of the children's club, the groovy gang. So I, again, had to sit on set each week and just go groovy, which was fun. It was good, and it had an amazing cast. I mean, Jeffrey Palmer was basically the lead actor in it, but it had everybody from the series. It just didn't have Reggie Perrin. So, and that, in a way, is a lesson for people to learn with comedy, that when you take away the element that is the driving force of the thing, his character was the character that instigated everything, that made things happen, and all the other characters were reactive. So when you just put the reactive characters there, but there's nothing for them to react against, nothing much happens, which is probably why it didn't work. But it was fun to do. It was enormous fun.
Yeah, and the remake of the original series also didn't work because it didn't have the original cast in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
That would be one of the reasons, yeah.
Martin Clunes might be a great actor, but he's not very good at remaking a series that was beloved and everyone liked. So
I've done remaking of things though sometimes, and sometimes it is worth doing. I did. John Cleese years ago made a whole series, in fact made a fortune, doing corporate videos for people, teaching them how to behave in the office and how to deal with customers and things like that. He set up a company with somebody else and they did these things and they sold in their millions all over the world. And it was so successful that eventually when they became out of date, and they did rather quickly because, for example, lots of people were smoking in them, lots of people had silly moustaches, and nearly everybody was a man, and almost certainly everybody was white. So he realized that these had become outdated and people couldn't use them as a tool to teach people how to behave anymore. So he remade them, but with a much more modern look, a modern cast and variations of all sorts of things. And they were quite good, I think. So he in a way also had learned from having done it once what worked and what didn't. So he edited them as well.
And one of the things you've done that is sadly been no longer available on BritBox because they removed it along with the new version. But what was it like, the original version of Spitting Image?
Ah, yeah. Well, it was great fun. And there were so many people involved in Spitting Image that none of us had the same experience. People were doing things all over the place at the same time. In order to get the program made, you would have the puppeteers in one room, you would have the performers, the voices, in another room, and they would record the sketches, and then those sketches would be played back so that the puppeteers could move to them. So they were done separately. And the same with, I did some of that, some of the voices, but it meant you did those rather quickly. You would go in, it was like doing a radio show. You would go in, you would record it, and once they were happy with it, you would move on. Sometimes you would do it with puppeteers, you would do it sort of both together, but that was much more complicated. Then there's a whole writing team, which is large and involved, again, some of the great writers. I think Andy Hamilton wrote for that. So there were extraordinary, but definitely Punt and Dennis, I think, and probably, Rob Grant and Doug Naylor, who wrote, what's that space thing?
Red Dwarf.
That's the one, Red Dwarf. Yeah, that space thing. Yeah. That's how dismissive I am of programs. It's amazing, isn't it? That space thing. I don't know what it's called now. Anyway, they wrote the lyrics for the song that I sang that went to number one, which is absolutely ridiculous that we had a number one with a silly song from Spitting Image. But yeah, we did.
And what was it like, knowing the feeling that your song had got to number one in the UK charts?
It was quite overwhelming, actually. As it happened, I thought, oh, that's fun. Oh, that's interesting. I'd just come back off holiday. And in those days, people didn't have mobile phones and, you couldn't communicate people. If you wanted to ring someone up, you could go to a phone box and say, how much is it to ring England? and you might do it once a holiday to say to people, "We're having a lovely time. Yeah, no, the money's running out. The money's running out. No, all right, bye." That was it. So, you didn't communicate about a holiday. You had a nice time, and you came back and told people about it afterwards and showed them photographs once they were made in the print shop. Anyway, I came back and I'd just bought myself an answer phone. Very modern, so that I didn't miss out on work. Not a good idea when you go on holiday for 3 weeks to Greece. I came back and it was absolutely full of messages. People saying, "Hey, brilliant, good news, great fun, well done, congratulations." And I thought, what's happened? And one of them was from Philip Pope, who wrote the music, who I started with when I was just a student. And I rang him up and said, "What's happened?" And he said, that song that they released from Spitting Image, it went to number 1. And I went, "Oh." He said, "In fact, it's number 1 at the moment." So I said to my wife, I think I'm number 1 in the charts." She said, "What?" I said, "That song I did for Spitting Image." She said, "What song?" I said, "I don't, it's about chickens." I couldn't even remember it. I mean, I'd sung it about 9 months earlier. We'd done it about 5 times, and that was it. We did it in the studio. Then we moved on to another song. So when they said we're going to release it, they said, "Do you want to, there's your contract, you have to sign a contract." So they sent it to me. I sent it back. Didn't think any more of it. And, so suddenly I was number 1 in the charts. I actually went to W.H. Smith, which in those days sold records. And I went to the record counter and I said, "Do you have a song called the Chicken Song?" And they went, "Yeah, it's number 1. I went, "Right, okay. Can I get a copy?" So I bought my own record.
And were you involved in it being shown at Top of the Pops, or was that again the classic "It's a Mime"?
Well, again, it was they just needed the record. So in fact, no, I never got to go along to the studio. Never did any of those things. Didn't go on tour. Didn't do anything. It just happened and it went away. But then what actually struck me as quite extraordinary is I bought one of those books, British Hit Singles, I think it was called. It's an enormous tome. It tells you everything about every single that's ever been made. And I bought the latest version, and there was the Chicken Song there. And it was in the list of number 1s. And at the time, in the whole history of the charts, so we're talking about, mid-80s or late 80s, and the charts started in 1956. And in that time, there had been fewer than 900 number 1s. Yeah, out of all those songs, only 900, and of those, quite a lot of them were the same band. So the Beatles had sort of 17, and Elvis had 20, and Cliff Richard had 21, ironically. It was extraordinary. So in fact, the number of people who'd had number 1 hits was even smaller. I think it was something like 450 people had had number 1 hits in the history of the charts. And then you looked at the people who hadn't had a number 1 hit, and you went, oh my God, I've had a number 1 hit, and they haven't. It's somewhat overwhelmed me, Tom, to think that I was in that position. But yeah, you can't take it away from me. I've got it. There are loads of them now, because actually now the way charts work, because it's down with streaming and downloading, and it got to the point where there was a new number 1 every week. So suddenly the numbers have shot up, and I think there are thousands now. But at the time, no.
And with the new version that went, and now no longer available to watch anywhere because they removed it from the service and removed it. They literally.
It's not my fault. I didn't do it. That's it.
Were you approached to do the new version of Spitting Image, or were you nowhere near it?
No, I think none of us were. I mean, I think Phil Pope, who wrote that song and wrote a lot of the music, was a musical director, and Steve Brown, who's another very successful writer. He worked on it for the later series. I don't think either of them were approached. I think the idea was that they were going to start again, do a new one. Not even John Lloyd was contacted, whose sort of idea it was. They decided to do it again, but they're a talented bunch. In a way, they are the people that were doing. When we did it, you look at the names who did it, and you look at Harry Enfield and Steve Coogan and Hugh Dennis and all those different Jan Ravens and all the names of the people who did it, and Chris Barry. but of course now people know who they are, or in fact, maybe not. Maybe those names are being forgotten. But there was a time when they were very famous. Those people, Steve Coogan, still, yes, very famous. But but yeah, they weren't famous when they did it.
Yeah.
In fact, I suggested Steve Coogan to the then producer Jeffrey Perkins, who was a friend of mine. I'd seen him when he was a student. I'd seen him do a stand-up at Manchester University, and I said he's brilliant at voices. He does amazing voices, and so they got him in.
Yeah.
And so Steve owes me a Ferrari. That's all I'm saying.
One of the many cars you keep stashing is Gary. Because I think I heard him on Rob Brydon's program. I think he said he was selling some of them because he was just fed up of that hobby now.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. No, he did actually offer me one once.
Oh.
Yeah, when I told him that I was the person who'd taken the tape of him that he gave me when I saw him as a student, I took it and gave it to the head of Granada Television and said, "This lad's very funny." And he was still a student, and they offered him a contract at Granada Television, and he turned it down. That's how confident he was.
Yeah.
And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "I forgot that was you, Mike." And I went, "Yeah." He said, "Well, I probably owed you one. I've got one in the garage." I went, "I couldn't afford the insurance."
And why do you reckon that Spitting Image was and still is so popular? Because it's now a really best-selling West End play that really well had several hiccups. But why do you reckon he was popular from the get-go?
Well, I think it's found a new generation, has it? And actually, there's always a group of people who sort of go, well, we should be taking the mickey out of these people.
And obviously, since Spitting Image went originally, then they had New Zoids, and they tried to create other versions that didn't work as well because it's the style of puppetry was the thing that captured the heart of it.
Absolutely, that grotesque look, that sort of, in a way, it goes right back to Gilray and all those people, the great caricaturists. That's what it is that grotesque look.
Yeah.
Taking the features and exaggerating them to the point where you go, yeah, that is them, but it's not really them.
Or a posh drama word, commedia. I'm going to try and say this correctly. Commedia dell'arte.
Beautifully said. I didn't know you spoke Italian. It's fantastic.
No, I don't speak it. No, I can't think of any other Italian words. Italian knowledge, done and dusted. And so, with your career not yet over, not saying there's an end in sight, no.
You never know.
You never know. What's your ambitions for the future of your amazing and wonderful career?
I've done most things, so that's nice. There was a few years ago where if you'd asked me that question, I would have said I'd love to work at the RSC, because in a way I became an actor with the idea that that's what actors did, and that I would end up doing Shakespeare at the Royal Shakespeare Company, and I have worked at the RSC now, so I sort of feel that I've done most things. I don't know. I'd be very interested to see what it was like if I suddenly got discovered. You know that thing that happens to people sometimes late in life, where people sort of go, well, he's good. And they give you a really huge part inside, like a lead part. I've never really done a lead part in a comedy. And I think the extra pressure of that would be interesting to handle. And to know that it was your responsibility to carry the whole thing would be interesting. I don't know. I'm perfectly happy, Tom. I've had a very nice time, and I've managed to do the whole thing and do very little. To me, it feels like I've done hardly anything. It feels to me as if I've spent my entire time thinking, well, I've got a job to do next Wednesday, and it's going to take several hours. Oh, well, I'm exhausted, But in fact, I feel as if I've spent my entire time on holiday. And when I have worked, most of it's been a lark. It's been great fun. And all that thing of, how do you learn your lines? Well, you do, because you want to be able to say it in front of the camera or whatever, or on stage. And so that's quite good fun as well. All those things have been fun, and I'm very lucky to have spent most of my life doing something that I really enjoy doing, and I've been employed fairly constantly. which is great. So I don't really, I'd just like to stay healthy and then I'd be able to carry on if it comes along. The ambition, of course, would be to turn down anything that I think is shit.
And with the future of, well, in the last few years, I think, it might no longer, but from what I know, it's a few years, a lot of podcasts have been turned into TV show. The Chris Ramsey and Rose Ramsey's. We've got Russell Kane's, and we've got Richard Herring's wife. I can't remember the name of Richard Herring's wife's.
The drunk women solving crime.
But would you ever see your podcast turning into an original, into a TV show similar to what the original format of Room 101 was?
I don't know. No, I think that you need to really tighten it up in that sense. You can't really do the long form when you do television shows. And a number of people, I mean, really ridiculously complimentarily have said since Michael Parkinson died, oh, you should do it. They should bring it back and you should do it, Mike. Because apparently I'm a very good listener. You wouldn't think so, Tom, but I apparently am. I don't know. I mean, I don't think I'm anywhere near as good as Parkinson was. And I think if you put me in front of a television camera and ask me to do the same thing, to be as relaxed and to listen as carefully as I do when we're doing something like this, I don't think I could do it. So I don't think it would be very good at all. And also, I don't think people watch television like that anymore. People listen to podcasts because they like the nature of it. They like either the very loose nature of it, or they like the fact that it goes on for some time. I've put out episodes that are over an hour long, and people then say, oh, I could have listened to another hour of that. And you think, right, that's interesting. Because you wouldn't watch it on television. You wouldn't watch me sitting in a chair, talking to someone else sitting in a chair for an hour. I don't think you would now. I think the audience isn't there. So, no, I don't really have any ambition for it to do that. I would like it to grow a little bit more. It would be lovely if, in fact, because I work with my son on it, it would be lovely if, in fact, my son could rely on it as an income. Yeah. I don't really need the income. I'm delighted to say, I'm very lucky. I know that. But I would love it for it to make a nice income for him, and I think it's worth that. I think it's what we do is good enough to be worthy of making enough money to do that. But it's a very competitive field, and there are a lot of people out there, and we do make money out of it. Obviously, otherwise we'd be idiots to do over 300 episodes. Then you could say I really had cracked. But to a large extent, I do it because of him. So yeah. I'm very proud of it as well. I think actually it would be a really nice thing as a legacy to have there, that people can listen to it. And I think that actually nearly everybody I've done it with is very pleased with it. It's not the sort of normal podcast. It's certainly, they talk about things that they don't talk about on other podcasts, which is nice. Whereas me, I always talk about things that I don't talk about on other podcasts. I bring up, people go, oh, that wasn't the question. I go, no, but it's what I fancied talking about. There we are.
And I can imagine if they ever did bring back a Parkinson type show, instead of them just sat on chairs, it could be them juggling. They could just stand there, do same conversation, same type of question, but he just said juggling instead of sat down.
Yeah, you've got to do something else. Yeah. It's an extraordinary idea. I mean, also the idea that people would hire a 66-year-old man with grey hair, thinning grey hair, dramatically thinning grey hair, I would say, that they would hire me to sit in a chair and talk to another, I don't know, 55-year-old. Who is going to watch that? Anybody under 45? Nobody.
Yeah, and because podcasts work so well, because I think it's because of self-produced. I think because it's not like not always a big company that say, don't do that. It's you going, I'll do that, or I might not do that, or this is a little bit on the.
Yeah,
that's why podcasts are becoming more widely known, and there's not just 12 podcasters, there's 12 million podcasts.
It's difficult, at the same time, once something is shown that you can make money out of it, those big companies do come in. There are a lot of podcasts that are out there, and they have the backing of these big companies. Therefore, they have the chance to promote themselves. They also have the contacts where they can get the big names on there rather easily, and have the funds to hire big names to front it, as it were. There are a lot of podcasts where somebody just is being hired to come in. They've not done it and set it up themselves. And then you get things like the podcast awards, where it's entirely dominated by non-independent podcasts. It's entirely dominated by BBC-produced podcasts and Audible-produced podcasts. So they have the backing. They can afford to they can pay to enter the competitions, whereas independent companies can't. So in fact, I can see that it might, in a way, also be somewhat spoilt by these big companies. But the thrust is, recently, both Richard Herring and I complained about this on Twitter and said, come on, where are the independent podcasts? Where are the ones who people are just doing it themselves, putting it out there, and somehow also managing to get as many listeners and as many people interested as the ones that you've pumped hundreds of pounds and thousands of pounds into?
Yeah. Well, I had found some other podcasts that I listened to had tweeted about it, and there was and if your podcast was on Apple Podcasts,
yeah,
there was a search engine that you search for your podcast, and you can vote for yourself. So literally all I did was I got my mother to vote for podcast to win this list. I tweeted about it just in case anyone was wondering. I popped it on Facebook, and then I voted for myself because I knew what I was doing. So I voted for my podcast. But it's interesting because it's weird that you have to pay to enter into an award show, to an award that at the end you're not really winning a prize for doing it. You're spending money that you might not actually have.
It's a very good idea. Whoever had it, a very good idea. I'm going to call myself, well, I'm not sure I should say this, but I am in the process, through somebody else, in the process of thinking of setting up the Independent Podcast Awards. And only independent podcasts are allowed to enter. So, who knows? And that will be, I think, free to enter. And then we will decide it. And then at the end of it, if you want to come to the award ceremony, you have to pay to get a ticket. And that's how it funds itself. So it's not looking to make money. It's looking to just simply give out awards to people. So who knows? Who knows? Maybe that will become, the one that people will be more interested in. I would be. I'm interested in finding out who those people are. Yeah.
Yeah, because the only issue I have with the podcasters generally at the moment is that the BBC has taken a lot of their radio shows and turning them into podcasts.
And they're not podcasts.
No, because the radio site...
No, absolutely. There are lots of the nominated, or the winners of the British podcast categories are in fact not podcasts. They're radio shows or audible recordings that have been released as podcasts. And that's not a podcast. What a podcast is when somebody does what you're doing here. We do this specifically for it to be a podcast.
And do you reckon that one day your podcast will ever make it onto the amazing app that allows random podcasts that you would really question BBC's attention to put it on, but it's brilliant because it's bonkers? Would you ever see your podcast going on the BBC Sound app?
And I think that would mean that you'd have to sign up to the BBC, wouldn't you? You'd have to sell it over to them, as it were. Is that what it means?
Well, from what I can see, because I don't really know, because there was a podcast that I listened to that used to be on BBC Sounds.
Yeah.
But every so often they had to edit bits out for BBC Sound because it was either too rude or it would really upset someone. So that the original. So I don't think you'd take them out. I think it's like a distribution platform because the Beef and Dairy Network podcast is on BBC Sound.
Yeah, I don't object to those things, and I think that if people are interested, then you should be able to find it as many ways as you can. Because a lot of people, particularly people of my age, when I say, I do this podcast, they say, how do you get a podcast? And I say, well, it's really, really easy. You can listen to nearly all podcasts really easily. Yeah. There's no trouble, but they have no idea how to do it. Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah. And do you have an ambition for where you want the podcast to be when you reach the milestone of like 600 or 700 episodes?
No, I'm quite happy with what it is, strangely enough, and it's like a little creature. It develops itself, it changes and forms, but it goes round in circles. People will go right back to the basic form of it and do it in a very straightforward way, and some people then break it down and go, no, I don't want this podcast for me. I want it for the future. I want it for So occasionally people will go off at tangents to it, which is fine. Because actually, what I'm asking people is, you choose what we talk about. So I'm not going to ask you questions. You choose what you want me to talk about, and then we'll do it. And that's interesting because it's they wouldn't normally get that. They wouldn't get that option. So I'm quite happy for it to be what it is. I'd just like a few more people to listen to it. And like all podcasts, I'd like a permanent sponsor. Somebody who says, yes, we are the backers of this podcast, and we are going to back it for the next 20 years. And you go, great, thank you very much. It doesn't have to be much, just enough to keep my grandchildren in shoes.
Yeah. And because of the amount of episodes you've done, do you now have people coming up to you, like celebrities and other friends of yours, come up to you and say, can I come on the podcast?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I do get that, yeah, which is nice. Although it's, sometimes it's always a constant thought in your head, will we run out of people? So you do become a bit obsessed with it. And I'm going to do an interview today. Yeah, which will be really interesting because it's with the producer and actor and comedian who is Count Binface.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I don't think I've ever seen an interview without him with the bin on his head.
No. He said, you want me to do it as Count Binface? And I said, no, do it as you, and we'll talk about Count Binface. So, in fact, he's in a way sort of exposing himself for the first time.
Because that's what's good thing about podcasts. So there's Richard Herring recently released one where the boat that plays Jabs Emu was on it as himself.
Yeah.
And then Stuart Goldsmith has done it where the bloke that plays Randy Feltface did it as himself because he didn't really do it. So I think that's what's good thing about podcasts is that it's a chance to be yourself, not the character you disguised as.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. It's much more interesting. But no, well, we'll see. We'll see. Like all these things, I always go into them sort of rather blind and see what happens. So that'll be fun. But he's actually coming around to my house. He lives really close. It is almost around the corner from my daughter, who lives close to me. So it's really weird. We got in touch through Twitter. He was one of those people who said, would you want me to come on? And I said, yeah, great, fantastic. So there we are. That's my day. That's the rest of my day.
Well, before we come towards the end of this glorious interview,
we did an episode because people asked for it. We did an episode. I talk about my son and the fact that he produces it, and in almost every episode. And so some people say, well, why don't you talk to him? What would his things be? What would he choose to put in a time capsule? So we did eventually sit down and said, should we do it? And he said, yeah, but it was great.
And what was the thought behind putting the theme tune to the podcast as its own separate album on Spotify?
Oh, is there? Yeah. On Spotify? Yeah. Good Lord, I didn't know that. See, the thing is, I would never search for my time capsule on Spotify. Why would I do that? I've heard them. Yeah. I was there. So I don't know, you're teaching me things. I didn't know that. That's interesting. In fact, if you put in My Time Capsule, just search My Time Capsule, there are 2 podcasts called My Time Capsule. There's one that somebody did years and years ago, and it's only about 4 or 5 episodes, I think. And so I'm amazed that we were allowed to have the name. Yeah. But clearly you can. People say there are only 6 jokes in the world, and they just get revolved round and round and round. I really feel sorry for the young stand-up comedian who won the best joke at the Edinburgh Awards thing. And today everybody's saying, this is a terrible joke. And it is a terrible joke, but it's not her fault that it was chosen as the funniest award. It's the fault of the panel of people who chose the jokes. It doesn't work as a joke. And in fact, it's based on a very, very old kid's joke. And the idea that nobody before this had seen the potential in the fact that big cats are called cheaters, that you hadn't seen. Oh, hang on, that sounds a bit like it. They cheat.
Yeah.
Oh, I wonder if you could make a joke out of that. Well, of course they have. So it's an astonishing thing that they've chosen it. And I'm sure her routine and her material, they may well have chosen it because actually her show was incredibly funny. When you go to see someone, you laugh, you laugh, you laugh, you laugh, and then you pick a joke from it. And the joke they picked is that she almost certainly would have gone, why did they pick that one?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I can't believe it.
Yeah. Well, last night on Next Up Comedy, the streaming service that is providing, it gives half the money that the people pay to them, half the money to the acts that they're putting on. So it's live streaming. It gives to young acts and not like your massive names. Some big names are on them, but it's all like your very up and coming that need exposure. And so she was on it last night, and she's a character comedian, so she didn't just do stand up. So she was playing a character of a brownie, of a 9-year-old brownie, and then says it, and then the audience go, oh, they groan. I've interviewed her as well because she's a very nice person, and so the crowd doing because it seems so obvious. Yeah, and it was a really funny show because she played many different characters.
Yeah, I'm sure that's the case. People are criticizing her and saying, I feel that she's getting a backlash because somebody's chosen this joke, but clearly in the show it was very funny.
Yeah.
But taken out of context and just put down as a joke, you go, that's a very obvious joke. Yeah. But that's not her fault.
Yeah. But my favourite bit of criticism of it was someone had put on a comment under the BBC article saying, this sounds like one of Jeremy Vine's brothers' jokes. I even bothered to research who the comedian is. They just knew he was related to Jeremy Vine.
Oh, well. Yeah, it's not an easy game, comedy. There's always someone who would say, well, that's not funny. And you go, fine. Well, then, to you it isn't. That's fine.
Comedy's different to everyone. And so, on that hilarious note, we come towards the end of the interview. Now, this is the point of an interview where you can promote or tell people where they can find you, but do not give away your home address. Well, where can they find you?
Well, I think you can very easily find my time capsule anywhere, really. If you just put it in search engines, it'll come up as my podcast. And then you have a lot of episodes to choose from. So if you're interested in listening to, I don't know, David Jason, Harry Hill, Dara O'Brien, Stephen Fry, Mark Gatiss, we've had some really amazing guests on there. And then we've also had guests that you will never have heard of. And they're just as fascinating, amazingly. Well, not amazingly. I think it's a good lesson to learn. Once you've listened to the famous people, listen to the non-famous people. And some of them are funnier. Oh, I said it.
Yeah. So there we have it. And if I was going to recommend I'm going to say episodes because it was in 2 parts, but I recommend the Danny Baker episodes.
Oh yeah. Well, who wouldn't recommend Danny Baker? He's an extremely funny man, and if it hadn't been for the fact that he had to go out to lunch, we would have done 3 episodes.
Well, he is amazing, and his sitcom that he wrote with Peter Kay playing his father is also incredible. I've not actually listened to the book version yet, but that is on the list of things for me to do because it's amazing, and so is the podcast. It's addictive, and it's a healthy addiction listening to your podcast.
That's nice. Good. Thanks, Tom. Yeah.
Great. My time capsule, healthy addiction.
A healthy addiction. Yes.
And so there we go. And so, want to see more from me? Well, you can check out my newly numbered 19 YouTube channels, or if you want to follow the same line as we've been talking to about podcasts, you can listen to my 12 podcasts that are available across my 19 YouTube channels because I'm not updating some of the feeds yet because A, I can't be bothered, and B, there's too many, and I don't know where the original files are, so I have to try and work out how to solve that. And so there should be more interviews from me soon. A new episode of many things will be coming soon because summer isn't over So I will not be leaving your streams. My face will not leave your streams forevermore. I will always be. You'll close your eyes. I'll be in your dreams. Ooh, I'll be like a nightmare. You'll see multiple of me. You'll be thinking you're going insane, but you're not. You just watching a video where I duplicate myself rather badly. Ooh, you'll never get rid of it. Ooh. Anyway, guys, thank you guys for watching. And remember, no, I've forgotten.